Okay, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Very few people, it's probably morning. Um, hey Todd, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. How's everybody doing?
I have some waves from Martin. Hey Martin. Um, yes, feel free to pop in the chat, say hi, ask us questions as we go. We're so excited to kind of be unpacking all things broker. And of course, Todd Fletcher, as a longtime CPG expert, both from the brand side and now from the broker side, since being acquired by JOH, has a ton of tidbits for us in navigating all things broker landscape. Um, so why don't you maybe introduce yourself and just explain to us kind of some of the things, some of the unique perspectives that you bring to the table, given your varying degrees of expertise over the years?
Yes, thank you. Let's be mindful of using the word expert and expertise. That's it's a fine line. We're dancing on that one. Yeah, no, thank you guys. Yeah, the real quick backstory on me and why I'm sitting in front of you today is so I've been in CPG for a long time. Goes all the way back to call it the 1999 timeframe. I was one of the original folks to help launch Red Bull in the United States. So I was with those good people for a number of years. I then joined Vitamin Water before Coca-Cola bought them. Then I stayed with Coca-Cola for a number of years. And then I was one of the first 8 people hired by Unreal Chocolate. And then I was doing some consulting on big brands, small brands, a lot of them, to be honest with you, that you've never heard of because sadly they didn't make it. And then towards the end of my CPG side, the brand side, I was with a condiment salad dressing company by the name of Tessie Mae's All Natural. And then I was with a Tetra packed, sustainably packaged water company called Rethink. So in any case, that brings you all the way up to 2020. And in that wild world, we all remember how much fun that was. The brand that I was at the time had a bit of a COVID moment. We had a pause. So myself and 2 other guys created what was the original manifestation of 660. And ultimately, all we were was an outsourced sales and marketing leadership solution for brands that were in the emerging space without putting a perfect number on it, somewhere around like 5 million to 15 million top line, where they needed help, but they weren't, quite ready to necessarily make the big leap of making the necessary hires. And our theory was always, at the end of the day, you can go out and hire all these big fancy name brands of like your VP of marketing and your chief revenue officer and all of that stuff, which are people that are great and you're going to need them someday. But in that early going, let's save a lot of that dollar in salary and put it back into the brand, and we can help you do that stuff. So we did that from 2020 through 2025, and we worked with brands of all shapes and sizes, really covered off on, I would say, almost all categories that you can find in a store, with maybe the exceptions being like pet and baby. But we were in the perimeter, we were in center store, we were in frozen, we were in fresh, we were all over the place. And then, yeah, along the way, as you can imagine, we would work with brands. Usually, an engagement would last anywhere from, call it 6 months to 18 months. And the broker conversation would always ultimately come up. We would help get a brand to a place where either they already had a broker or they needed a broker or they wanted to change brokers. So we were a part of all of that stuff. And in that moment, we became friendly with a big Northeast broker, JOH, stands for Johnson O'Hare. And we had a good, let's call it, unofficial partnership where when we had a brand that we felt, one, they had a reason to go and attack the Northeast, that JOH was one of the first places that we would always bring a brand that we thought was ready for that next step. And simultaneously, when they were coming across brands, whether it was from shows or, shaking hands in meeting rooms, in waiting rooms of retailers, that they thought really had something but weren't necessarily quite ready for JOH, they would flip them down to us and help. We'd help them kind of clean up whatever needed to be cleaned up, provide a little bit more strategic direction, some organization, and then hopefully bring them back to the likes of a JOH. So all of that culminates in April, May of last year, where they ultimately acquired 660. And so now we are in-house with a broker where we serve as we kind of wear a bunch of hats. One is we definitely have got our, marketing accelerator, incubator, type services that we provide for brands that are already inside of the JOH network. But we still have our own autonomy that we can operate outside of JOH, work with brands that aren't there yet, even if they are ready or not ready for JOH. And then even taking it a step further, we can work with brands that don't even work with JOH and have other brokerages or have a need for a broker that sits outside of JOH. We can still make that relationship work. So, very long-winded way of saying I've been on the brand side, I've worked with brokers, I've seen brokers, but now I'm on the broker side, so I get to see it from a broker looking at a brand side.
I love it. And honestly, I think it's an interesting topic to unpack because being as a service provider to get products off the shelf
Yep.
over the past 11 years working with Social Nature, I can't tell you how many brands are like, yeah, but how do I get on the shelf? So I think that that just begs the question that, I mean, yeah, we know that a broker helps you get on the shelf, but like when to use what broker and I think it's kind of this misconception that you'd only one broker would do it all for you. So maybe we can kind of help unpack that. So you mentioned that, there's a lot of nuances around when a brand might be ready for JOH versus when a brand might be ready for a broker. Maybe could we start there? Are there like kind of like JOH is a big papa broker. So maybe there's probably stepping stones to get to JOH.
Yeah. Yeah, I think undeniably, and there's no single answer, which I know, isn't what everybody wants to hear. We all want to hear about the silver bullet, and it's like this is how you do it, and everybody does it. But there's a number of different ways to kind of approach the broker, the broker topic. Um, I would say first and foremost, and I'm not dodging your question, actually, we'll get to it, but it's like the first question I think from a brand standpoint is there's got to be an understanding of what you're trying to achieve, right? At the end of the day, is like given the product that you have, the category in which you exist, the geography in which you currently sit, what is it that you're trying to do? I know at the end of the day, everyone's like, I'm trying to sell more of whatever that thing is. I get that. But the reality is that there's a lot of layers that lead to ultimately that end game. So first and foremost, I guess I'll take a step back and kind of like lay out one. This may be completely sort of elementary, but I apologize. It was kind of part of the lead up. Is like what a broker does and what they are.
Yes,
Right? Is that
let's
fair?
do it.
Okay, cool. So the broker is basically a liaison between your brand, your company, and ultimately a retailer. And they wear a ton of different hats at the end of the day. So a broker for you, once you get into that level of relationship, is going to be handling things like one, getting you in front of the retailers that make the most sense for you. The hard pause inside of that is that their job is to help you open doors. They're not going to go out and just get them for you, right? That is still your job. They're going to get you an audience at the end of the day. That is their primary role. In leading up to that, what they're going to do is help you prepare what is your story, what is your back end economics, what is your strategic plan in order to put it into the right audience to make the most sense to ultimately get the outcome of them saying, yes, you're approved. We would love to have Todd's potato chips on my shelf. So they're kind of helping through that entire process of things. Now, in leading up to this, I was like, all right, what would be a fair analogy? And I don't know if this is a good one or a bad one, but I'm a sports guy. And so for me, the broker almost serves as a bit of like a sports agent between an athlete and a team. The athlete in this case would be all of the brands that exist out there in the world. The team is obviously the retailer. So what that agent is doing is working with the athlete, in this case, the brand, to identify what is it that's great about you? What is it that makes you different? What is your superpower at the end of the day? And then when it's all said and done, what teams will you make the most sense for? Simultaneously, they're working and understanding the team side and knowing what that team is looking for, what culture fits make the most sense, what are the end game goals that they want to get out of the athletes that they bring on board. And then that broker or that agent can look into the full landscape of athletes that they know and say, oh, that person would be perfect. We should make this merriment happy or make this marriage happen, I guess. So that at the end of the day, in a very sort of, again, elementary fashion, is kind of what the broker does. But I do want to, again, reiterate that a broker's job is not to, they'll do this for you, but at its core, their job is not to get you doors. Their job is to get you an audience with people who have doors that then allow for you to have a more seamless process into getting into those doors. Now, looks like you got something.
Oh no, this is making a lot of sense to me, and it's interesting because a lot of brokers, a lot of brands find out about social nature via their broker.
Yep.
And one of the things that I actually find interesting is that brands come to the table telling me that their ideal target market is, and the brand and the broker will often say, "But how do we know this? Like, I know that's what you think. I know that's what you started the company by design, but we need to validate this." And so it's an interesting kind of nuance as a startup kind of is getting into the emerging brand space that a broker will actually tell them, go to social nature and validate your, three, four P's, price, position, packaging, so that we actually are able to tell the story that you want to tell through data. And so it really is just kind of like illustrating that piece.
Yes.
Um, yeah, but please
No, no,
continue.
no. I couldn't agree with you more. And so, one of those questions that we've discussed leading up to this is like, when is the right time to actually,
Hmm.
when do you think you need a broker at the end of the day?
Hmm.
And a big part of that is being able to effectively prove what you just said, Ashley, is like that you do, like your product market fit, you understand what it is. You understand who you're selling to, and there's actually a demand for whatever that thing is that you've created. Because at the end of the day, what we've seen have happen in the past is like brands will get to a broker too soon. And
Mm.
when a broker, mind you, it's a two-way street. So if I am, and I'll just keep picking on Todd's potato chips, if Todd's potato chips goes to said broker, and I don't have a selling story yet. I've got this amazing and what I've imagined to be this amazing piece of potato chip innovation, but yet I haven't been onto a shelf. I haven't sold by way of D2C. I haven't opened to Amazon. I don't really have anything to point to as far as a real selling story is concerned. One, I think your likelihood of landing a broker is going to be tough in that moment
Mm.
in time. So, step one would be do your best to actually build those fact points that you can allow to be a big part of whatever selling materials you ultimately create. On the flip side, though, is that there will be moments, depending on the broker you're with, and it may be just that they completely agree with what your proposition is, and they believe in the innovation that you've brought to the table, and they love you as a founder. They may bring you on board. But in that moment, you've got to know that there's shared responsibility to the fact that even with those two things, you believe it and they believe it, you still need to bring it to a retailer. So
Hmm.
in that moment in time, even though you've now got said broker, your likelihood of getting onto a shelf, I don't want to say is zero because I think the broker probably helps by way of relationships, but it's not a guarantee. It's far from it. So in that, where I'm going as far as it's too soon, is that obviously brokers aren't free. So in that moment, if you don't have truly fact-based materials to demonstrate why you genuinely deserve a spot on a shelf, you may end up trying to build the airplane in the air while simultaneously paying someone who is trying to get you on the shelf when you're not ready to do it. So it's just dollars being spent. And we see that a lot because we'll get brands on the smaller side will 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 love the fact that they've landed a broker. But again, their expectations is that that broker equals doors.
Mm.
If that doesn't come to fruition, you're ultimately spending dollars against something that you're not ready for. That should be dollars that are being spent to actually build that selling story that I made mention of before.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
And I have heard just I'm sure a ton of emerging brands are listening, is I have heard different compensation structures as it relates to brokerages.
Yeah,
And it does seem like, obviously a broker has its own specialty. And so, whether there's equity or, like, maybe we can kind of explain to brands like what that typically looks like and
yeah,
what you can expect when you're bringing on a broker for the first time and how that changes as you go upstream.
totally. So the fundamentals are going to be you're going to have retainer based, and then you're going to have, percentage compensation based. We can get more creative with equity in a little bit, but traditionally speaking, those are going to be kind of the two primary ways in. At the outset, there's going to be a retainer when you don't have sales yet, right? And so they need some sort of compensation to justify all the things that they're going to be supporting you with. So that number is negotiable. It's going to fall in line with what category you're in, what you're trying to achieve, what are your goals, et cetera. But I think that, without putting a perfect number on it, that's going to live somewhere in the neighborhood of, call it, anywhere from $2,000 to $7,500 a month, ballpark, right? These are for emerging brands. Those numbers can change. Then, as time goes on, ultimately, what everyone wants to have happen is that sales will get to a point where a percentage will ultimately become more than that retainer.
Right.
So that percentage is generally speaking going to start, and again, don't hold me to this every single time, but generally speaking, is around 5%, right? 5% off net sales is going to be more or less your starting point. Now, as time continues and you become the $100 million brand that everyone on this webinar is going to be, that 5% has the opportunity to go down. Like, you can continue to pull that down, knowing that you're obviously making more, so they're making more, so you can bring that down a little bit. Now, there's no doubt that there are in the world of investment, in the world of venture capital, that there are brokerages out there that will allow there to be an equity chunk in lieu of dollars, in lieu of percent, to help offset some of ultimately the dollars that would be, I guess, arguably better used going back into brand. Now, mind you, in those moments, now you're truly tied to a broker from an ownership perspective that, in my opinion, is something that I would look for further down the road.
Mm.
I don't know if it's really something that I would jump into haphazardly. But nonetheless, those are the fundamentals. It'll start with a retainer, and then we'll have a percentage that once that percentage is higher than the retainer, you'll move to a percentage model.
I love that. That's very helpful. Thank you. Um, the other thing that we talked about before the webinar started, which is I think is an important kind of bit of a jam sesh that we had that you mentioned here is like, okay, so how do you even attract a broker? And so we're talking pretty early stages, and I think you said it really well. Like, how can you come up with a demonstrable sell-in story to attract broker and even retailers? So like in the beginning, you're trying to basically attract stakeholders to help scale your business. And you had some like unique ideas that really, if you're able to do it and set up that foundation, then you can set yourself up for scale. Maybe we can share some of those pieces here.
Yeah, I mean, at the outset, and we've spoken to brands about this at length. Is there's a couple different ways in, right? Is one, and I'll keep reiterating it, and not because I don't think everyone's listening, but I've said it a million times, is like the broker is going to ultimately be a phenomenal partner for you. They're not going to be a silver bullet for you by any stretch. So in the very beginning, it is, I would say, understanding, and some of this is going to be like a bit of like a no shit Todd kind of a thing, but that's okay. Is really understanding your product and understanding your category and understanding what it is that you're bringing to the table that is different or incremental to what already exists. Because at the end of the day, both brokers or retailers aren't interested in necessarily adding another Me Too brand, right? Like, if you're just trading horses on shelf, it's not worth the effort of new item forms, and that needs to come off and that needs to come in, and we need to figure out new distribution channels and all of that stuff. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So one, ensure that you've got a product inside of a category that is in need of whatever incremental benefit that you've now provided. So there's that. So that's part of your selling story, kind of a qualitative side. Then when you get into the quantitative side of things, I think there's a lot of work that you can be doing as far as inside of your own local and regional land that doesn't require a broker. And I'm not talking about going to farm stands. Like, there's a lot of fantastic independent retailers that you can create a direct relationship with and actually generate on-shelf sales that can then be led to a larger retailer deck to prove that you've got a purpose and a place to be in the world. No two ways about it. The other is, even at a much larger scale, is Amazon and D2C. Now, mind you, it's a little bit of a different skill set, of course. and timelines and route to market are completely different than retail. But at a bare minimum, it allows you to compete with others like yourself and allows you to get in front of consumers where real dollars are being exchanged. That in turn can be part of the validation story that will be powerful when you can get in front of like said broker and said retailer down the road. Um, so that's a big part of kind of leading up to it. And then ultimately, I think what we've seen is, and this is where a broker can help you. Also, groups like a 660 can help you. Shameless plug, but it can be others like us as well. Is taking that information because sorry to back up. We've worked with a lot of brands who've done exactly that. They've worked with the Amazons of the world and they've worked with the D2Cs of the world and even in their own local independents. And they built a nice story. And they've come to us and said, "All right, we're ready to go. We're ready to scale." The reality is like your path to a regional chain is not necessarily different, but it is nuanced. Well, it's certainly very different than an Amazon, where there is no timeline, there's no calendar, there's no category reviews, there's no shelf resets, there's none of that kind of stuff. So step one is taking your selling story and then working with those brokers, outsourced independent groups that understand the retail landscape that can best shape you for the best retail story that you could possibly need. And that's where we begin to start going into, all right, what are the margin realities of getting into a retailer? What are the margin realities of working with a broker if you're already not working with a broker or you are? When you think about your trade spend, what is that you need to be aware of? When you think about your extra marketing spend, what is that? How is that important? And I say that not to like, move this conversation away from brokers, but it's being able to take that initial selling story and now turn it into a retail conversation that then can be leveraged by a broker or brought directly to a retailer to demonstrate that you know what you're doing in the world of retail. That bet that retailer is taking on you, the risk has been brought way down because they now feel confident that they're working with a young brand that understands the landscape that they're about to go into. So that would be a big next step is step one, understanding where you fit in the world. Step two, actual demonstration of the fact that people care about this thing that you've made. Step three, you can show how what you've done translates into retail. And then step four would be putting it in front of a broker or a retailer to ultimately get the payout on shelf.
I love this. And you mentioned, I mean, you explained an interesting relationship between you and JOH where, you might start working with brands, a minimum 5 million, maybe a little bit earlier. And then and that's kind of and you might be the stepping stone to work with JOH. And again, JOH is a huge broker, so there's a lot of in between stepping stones.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, and maybe you can explain to everyone the difference between 660 and a broker, because I think that that's an interesting like nuance there too. And what is how do you describe 660 and kind of the benefit of fractional, like kind of outsourcing some of these fractional pieces to a 660?
Yeah. Um, so 660 is a we would be, I mean, we're a part of a broker, so I'm going to kind of, well, we're going to sort of separate the pieces and then we'll bring it all together.
Mhm.
So if you were to separate the pieces, 660 is a strategic partner focused on uh, retail, I'd say accelerating your retail presence. So whether your retail presence has to do with building your route to market in terms of what is an appropriate growth strategy, we can work with you guys on that. And that includes everything from overall brand messaging and consumer targeting to actually getting into the brass tacks of what geography should we go into, what retailers make the most sense for the product that you have created, and how do we best reach those people. We can work in that regard. Then, taking it a step further, we can take it to more of a tactical place where we have got an entire arm of our 660 group that is focused on all shopper marketing. So, all of the programs from the fundamentals of search, on-site display, to retailer specific programs that happen at Kroger.com, that happen at stopandshop.com, whatever it may be. And then taking it outside of store from a meta campaign development, management, and optimization, we can do that for you as well. And then in the background, again, this is now because we're with JOH, is that it's not all what was happening before JOH acquired us, is that we were we were counting on the life experience and career experience of the three people that founded it to do a lot of that. Now we still do that, but now we've got a whole lot more horsepower behind us. We've now got
Mhm.
the full data analytics team that sits behind us at JOH. Whether you are or you are not a JOH client, we can certainly tap into the insights that come from those that work there that are working with pick your favorite retailer USA and understand what they care about, when they care about it, and how to best get to the right people. So that's how all of that. So we live inside of the world of the brokerage, but we're not working directly with the buyers themselves. That's where
Mhm.
the handoff would take place, is that the men and women that are brokers, the account managers and the account directors, where they would be the direct liaise between said brand and the buyer of him or herself from said retailer.
Got it. I see. And so, and is it, and maybe let's take a step even earlier. So, how about like a when, because this has come up with a lot in the questions, is like at what stage in revenue
Yeah.
do you start outsourcing to players like these? How about that?
So we'll do it two ways. We'll start with the broker side. So on a broker side, I would say that there isn't, and I know no one's going to love this answer, but it's like there's not a number, right? I'm not going to say you've got to get to $2 million and now you're ready for a broker, right?
Mm.
But what I would say is that you'll find a strategic moment in time where you've effectively done what we talked about before. You've created that selling story. You've got proof of concept and it all makes sense. Cool, thumbs up. Now you've got yourself into a place where you do need to make a jump into more of the regional chains, right? You feel like you've hit a critical mass of what you can do as a founder and as a founding team and making the direct connections with the, albeit wonderful retailers, but more of the independents that exist at your fingertips or even at Amazon or D2C. Once you move up into a place where you think that that regional chain and certainly the national chains, but the regional chains are a place where you need to go. I'm not going to say you can't because there's definitely ways that you can work directly with those regional chains, but the broker does allow for a more seamless introduction to those men and women that hold the power of the shelf. And the reason for it is twofold. Like one is that those buyers, if you actually think about all of the brands that currently exist on any given shelf and all of the brands that want to get on that shelf, it's not because they don't want to talk to you as founders. Like they love a great founding story, but there's quite literally not enough hours in a day to meet with
Mhm.
each individual brand and actually have a meaningful takeaways to know whether or not you want them in or they're out. There's just not enough
Mhm.
time. So they work
Mhm.
with brokers, given that a broker will represent more than just one brand, obviously. It's like, hey, I want to sit down with you, buyer Ashley, and I've got 8 brands to talk to you about today. So there's that. And then the other part of it, and this one, I don't want to say flies in the face of what I just said, but I'm sorry, retailers also want to work with brands that they know are going to require less hand holding once they're on shelf.
Mhm.
So they feel confident that buyer Ashley is now working with a broker and bringing that broker is bringing a brand to her that she already knows that said broker, he or she has already brought to me 20 other brands. They don't all need to be high flying success stories, but that broker understands how we work as a retailer. They understand the margin requirements and what I need. They understand the number of promotional weeks that make the most sense for us. So a lot of what would be, let's call it the learning curve, has already been taken care of because that broker is already trained and has on the go training with all of the said brands to make sure that like the likelihood of success is much greater. So that would be sort of in that moment in time. And then the other way in, and this is kind of an interesting one, is as you as founders are all at all of these different shows, another way that you're going to be led into the retail world is actually not by the brokers or by the retailers, but actually by the distributors. So you're going to come across the good people of UNFI or from KHE. They're going to say, "Oh my God, I love this product. We want you on our shelves, or we want you on our trucks, rather." That's great news, but we all also know that they're not going to put you on those trucks until you have those anchor accounts. So at that point, you need to begin to identify how do I get to those anchor accounts? And more often than not, a broker is going to help you get to those anchor accounts faster than you're going to be able to get there on your own. There's just, again, too many brands that are trying to all get into the top of that anchor account funnel. And that broker, if done right, has got a little bit of like a fast pass, like a Disney fast pass, where they're going to be able to get you to the front of the line faster than you just waiting in the queue. Um, and then as far as the other side, as far as the 660 side is concerned, the beauty of it is in the past, before we were with JOH, we'd oftentimes kind of almost consult our way out of a job. And what I mean by that is like our story was always, we'll work with you until you are truly ready to build your own internal team. Once you're ready to add your VP of marketing and your VP of sales and like all of the other people around it, we're there to be a more efficient spend. We're not going to save you money, but we're going to be a more efficient spend because more dollars are going to go back into brand versus like going into salary. With who we are today, we actually work with, I mean, again, I'm not going to rattle off brands, but now our brand upside is we've got a $200 million brand that we work with. We've got $90 million brands that we work with. And then, yes, we've got the sub 5 million brands at the same time. The ones at the top, they probably don't need as much, let's call it high level strategic thinking. They've got really bright men and women that are doing all of that. But what we now have access to is more of like I said before, is like the tactical support that we can provide, whether it's from creative development or consumer messaging or digital media or shopper marketing is always a really popular one. Those are all things that we can kind of plug and play with really brands of any size.
Amazing. Okay, Thomas, I know you have your hand up. Put your question in the Q&A section. I'm gonna turn to questions because I feel like people are starting to be like, okay, but don't forget about me. Don't
All
forget about
right,
me. Okay.
let's do it.
All right. Is Social Nature a broker? No, Social Nature is not a broker. We work with a lot of brokers to help products get off the shelf. So as Todd mentioned, I would consider as like a shopper marketing tactic where we drive new customers into retail stores of your choosing. So we have a community of 1 million natural shoppers, and that's how we do that. So feel free to ping me, find me on LinkedIn, and we can talk more about that. Martin wants to know, is broker success guaranteed? Or so in any of these terms that you kind of come up with your broker, is there any kind of expectations that you could lay out before
Yeah,
pressing go?
absolutely. I think this is a big part is, and this, you as brand owners need to own this moment. So go into it from the standpoint of what are those KPIs that you're trying to achieve? And yes, the end game is more doors and more retail distribution. That's great. And that can sit at the top. That doesn't need to go away. But you need to be mindful of all of the things, like what are all the underpinnings that lead to that? So one is just meetings, right? Like meetings achieved. So that would be kind of phase one. And then let's have that sit underneath of new retail distribution is meetings achieved. Then sitting underneath of that will be effectively support and improve upon current selling story and current selling assets. So that could be your pitch deck, that could be your sell sheets, that could be the story in totality, right? They're not going to write it for you, not by any stretch of the imagination, but they should be able to fine tune it and allow for there to be enough of a retail story inside of your larger story that lends itself to actually achieving more of the meetings that sit above that aspect of things. Then underneath of that selling story is really helping you dive into what are all the fundamental elements needed when it comes to building that selling story. So that's going to be your pricing strategy, making sure that we have a really sharp pricing strategy that fits inside of the margin requirements for you as a company, but also takes into account the realities of the margin realities that are going to exist for different methods of distribution, and then most certainly for the broker itself. Then you've got things like your go-to-market partners, like how are we going to get there? The UNFIs and the KHEs of world. A lot of these really good brokers, they've got relationships already with those distribution partners. Again, no guarantees that they're going to get you onto a truck, but they can get you an audience. So we can feel really good about that. Then we begin to think about like from a targeting perspective is like really helping you build your go-to-market strategy. What regions are we going after? What retailers inside of those regions are we going to be going after? And then what are the investment realities behind both of those that are going to be required in order to actually have a chance at winning? So all of that, again, without getting into the exact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 KPIs, it's like you've got all of the things that ultimately ladder to, yes, the end KPI of being more retail doors. But to answer the original question, the what's the best way to say this is if they come back, if no new distribution is achieved, but they've done all of the other stuff underneath, there's equal parts of saying, maybe he or she, the new broker, isn't doing a great job of getting my brand and getting the story right. But simultaneously, I'm also here to tell you that that's a look in the mirror moment and say, what am I? What am I doing wrong? Is my baby ugly, right? The thing that nobody wants to actually think about. So those two things are all part of sort of the KPIs and the measurement of whether or not a broker is working for you.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. And Karen has some interesting questions around marketing spend as it relates to brokers and also trade shows.
Mm,
I'll just say anecdotally, most startups have not considered a marketing budget properly. Like when I don't know if who is. I feel like it was John Foraker who was posting recently around this is like if you're a small brand, expect to spend 15% on marketing. Like as you go upstream, you don't have to spend as much on this foundational stuff, but you best believe you need a marketing budget. And
yeah.
I would say that it's brands who clearly understand that and that's part
Yes.
of their pitch to retailers that they have a sell-through plan.
Yes.
You're going to win so much more so so you need money and you need to have a way to spend it. So sorry, that's definitely the case this year. But Todd, kind of question, any kind of like thoughts on that and maybe how has your advice changed recently? Because I know this market and tariffs is especially tough for brands.
Yeah, well, one, I don't know John, but I agree with him 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
It is, I've been taught and live inside of a world because I'm also mindful of founders and young brands. Not everybody has got the same appetite for investment. I'll live generally speaking and say 8 to 15%. This is off of your top line revenue forecast. Like set that money aside, you're going to need it. Then, as I look at whatever that chunk of dough is, we are going to put at minimum probably 65% of it really, really close to the shelf, right? We're going to get it as close to the point of conversion as humanly possible. And it's going to be, in my opinion, and this is just mine. This isn't law by any stretch. But it's going to be things like it's going to be search. I mean, it's going to be on-site display. It's going to be working with, xretailer.com, whatever is there. It's going to be Instacart. It's going to be how do we get your product into baskets? It's going to be less about big, sexy stuff, like when it's all said and done. Not to say that we can't test and learn with some of that, but generally speaking, I'm going to be really, really close to shelf. Yeah, and the tariff game, I mean, I would say that's kind of where like that 8% side of things starts to like creep into it, Ashley. And I want to be fair. But inside of that though, like the underpinnings of a lot of that 8 and 15% also is being very focused and targeted and smart about what it is you're doing with that money. Which is why, again, from a growth perspective, we're big believers in creating a regional story and then actually learning what you can learn and then replicate that regional story as you move from region to region. It allows your dollars to work a heck of a lot harder versus trying to stand up retailers all over the United States, where kind of like every touch is a new touch. If you can keep your dollars all in one neighborhood, there's a greater likelihood of like crossover of tactics and crossover of people that have had your product in their homes. So
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say that that is social nature's superpower is that you can give me your random 701 store locations because you just got into Walmart and now what? Because by the way, they're giving you 700 store locations nationally to see how you perform within particular regions.
yeah,
So it's not like they're making your job easy, and that's where a lot of brands I would say kind of challenger brands, the 5 million brands come to Social Nature because they have these random store lists and they're like, now what? And Ibotta won't work in that regard. But
yeah,
I'm with you. And then the other thing I would just ask is maybe I'll go back to Karen's piece because I think everyone, we all need to register for Expo West by December 31st. So should you go to Expo West?
Whoa.
I know it's a big question.
Oh,
There's loopholes. You don't need to have a booth, by the way, guys. You can just go and attend. There are like, there's ways to go and, figure out what's happening there without spending 100K. But what's your thoughts on that?
okay. This is one man's opinion. All right. This is what this is. And if you choose to go against it, I'm okay with that too. Is I feel like, well, one, trade shows, let me start before I get to Expo West. That's like the 900-pound gorilla. Trade shows as a whole, I'm a believer in. There's no two ways about it. I think it is a great moment to get out in front of people that are in your industry and can try your product and can, when you ask for it and you're working with the right people, give you honest feedback, right? And of course, there's business benefits as well. You're going to bump into people like Ashlie from Social Nature. You're going to bump into a buyer. You're going to bump into distributors. Those things truly happen. Like there's no two ways about that. Um, I will say though, like as we start to wake, but well, and actually, sorry, one more pause. My favorite trade shows for brands on the come up are actually the buying shows that go along with the UNFIs and the KEs of the world.
Fair.
And I know that requires you to actually be with UNFI and KE, so I know a major asterisk. I get it. But those are really buying shows where retailers are walking the floor and actually putting in orders. So that suddenly becomes something that like very quickly you can pay off and you leave that show feeling really, really good. So there's that. All right, now we fast forward to Expo West. Listen, I think Expo West, in terms of, well, two things. I think there are stages where it makes a lot of sense for a brand. I think you need to be in the right stage. And I think you need to go into it with the appropriate expectations. Because the reality is that you're not going to get out of Expo West, depending on the size of your team, for any less than more than likely 25 to $30,000. And I may be overshooting it depending on shipping and what kind of product you've got.
No, I think there's no way. Yeah, that sounds low to me. Yeah.
Right. So it's in that neighborhood. It's a lot of
Mhm.
money at the end of the day. So if you're going there from the standpoint of one, you are at a your financial footing is really solid. You've already got some nice regional chains. You've got a good selling story, and you're going there to attract some of the bigger fish that exist out there. Maybe we haven't landed Whole Foods National yet. Maybe we haven't landed Kroger. Maybe we haven't landed Albertsons. Maybe we're trying to get in front of the good people of Bentonville and up there in Costco land. That's great because but you've already got great stuff that's happening regionally up and down the East Coast. Maybe we've peeked over into the Midwest. And again, I'm an East Coast guy, so it could be the other way going this way. Then I think Expo West actually is a nice moment for you, both in terms of progressing your business in a really big, meaningful way without doing it in a way that you're counting every dollar and you're going to leave there very, very sad if
Mhm.
any of those things don't happen. So there's one moment. Anything before that moment, I would not do it. It's too
Mhm.
expensive at the end of the day. I would go there, I'd press flash, I'd bump into those same people, I'd have products in a backpack, I would sneak stuff into VIP rooms and all the other stuff that's going on there. I'd figure out ways to get creative and have fun. And then obviously I'd just learn about it and you'd see it. You understand what floor you need to be on, what hall is most important. Should I be inside? Should I be outside? All of that stuff. So that's where I would do it. Then once you've landed those accounts, and I know this is probably beyond a lot of the brands that we have today, but even now, let's say you've gotten to a place where you've got Kroger and you've got Costco and you've got some of those big guys. I think there's a moment where you go away again because there's nothing more that you're going to squeeze out of that fruit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then come back to it when you're trying to exit. Now you're there for a different audience. You're there for private equity. You're there for being acquisition. You're there for all the big strategics. So for me, there's like two windows that make the most sense. I feel really bad when I see brands that are there, and there are so many that are there that clearly don't have the money to be there, and they're
Hmm.
just not ready. Their booth isn't
Hmm.
ready. Their story isn't ready.
Hmm.
The way they present themselves isn't ready. And I guarantee it cost them every bit of $30,000.
Yeah, and it takes some practice to get it right. I think that there's a lot of like the fancy foods go.
Yeah.
through Naturally. Naturally is a really great advocate for startups. So there's a lot of ways to offset the cost, but I agree to go from zero to Expo, that would be pretty intimidating.
It's tough.
Also, I do love I think founders should go check it out and walk the show and just see what's out there and get a sense of like what's happening in their space for sure. But I feel like we're at time. I feel like everyone's been so lovely. We're just starting to see attendees drop off, so I feel like it might be time for us to let people go to the next call. But Todd, we could talk about this for hours. I really appreciate your time and expertise. Um, oh yeah, my marketing manager is reminding me that we have a giveaway of 500 free activations for anyone who wants to test and learn social nature. If you're interested, ping me. Anyways, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, happy holidays soon. I know we're about to, probably another couple weeks and then we're ready to throw the towel in, right?
I would agree. Well, thank you guys for having me, and thanks for
Yes.
everybody who joined. It was great.
Yes. Thanks, guys.